Hey everybody, it's Brad. Today we're going to learn how to make a knockdown stitch in Total Control U. And what a knockdown stitch is, if you don't know, is a stitch that goes down first on something with a nap, like a towel or fur, something that kind of can poke up through the embroidery and make it not look good. And when you really want to use this is if you're doing something narrow like lettering and you're embroidering it on something with a nap like a towel or fur. The traditional way to alleviate the stitches sinking into the nap is to use a water-soluble stabilizer on top of whatever you're embroidering. And while that does work to an extent, it really doesn't work as good as a knockdown stitch. So we're going to look at how we would go about creating a knockdown stitch in Total Control U. And the first step is to open up your Floriani Total Control U program, and at the My Floriani Today page, click on Create a New Design. And once you've done that, we're going to go over to our text tool over here up at the top left corner. We're going to left click on that and then left click again on the first option, which is just the one that says text. It's capital letter T. Left click on that. Our cursor turns into a pointer with a little A attached to it. And you're going to left click anywhere in the design field. So we left click anywhere in here. It doesn't really matter where. And some text shows up. The default text is my text up here. And we're going to change that to say whatever word we want. So here we're going to change this. I'm going to put in the word meadow, my daughter's name, if you don't know. And before anything happens in the design field in our properties menu in Floriani, you always have to hit apply. So we're going to hit apply. Now it says meadow over here. Very good. And the next thing we need to do is, in order for the technique I'm about to show you to work as quickly and easily as it does, you have to use one of the fonts that is in the outline subset of fonts that are built into this program. If you look in our properties menu, we have the option to change the category of fonts that we're looking at. So the fonts that we want are in the outline category. Okay, so we're going to change this from all fonts to outline. And here is now, if we click on this list, now it shows only outline fonts. Okay, the fonts all, or most of them anyway, in the program have a little symbol next to them to symbolize what they are, and the O symbolizes outline. Now you may be saying to yourself, Brad, there's some that don't have an O next to them. That's because there are some fonts that actually fit into multiple categories, and if there's another category that it kind of fits in better than, better than one that fits in better than another, it'll have a different symbol next to it. But you can rest assured that any font that you pick in any of these subcategories also fits in the subcategory that you chose. So this one down here, for instance, Fables, this HW that's next to it signifies that that is a handwriting font. But the fact that it shows up in this list means that it also is an outline font. Okay, so we're going to pick one. Actually, the one that I had selected before is the one that I want to use, Happy. You can pick any of them, basically. It doesn't really matter which one you pick. Some do look better than others. But so you pick the one you want and you hit apply. All right, so boom, there we go. Now, what it means that these fonts are outline fonts is that there is a version of them that is just outlines. So if we go into style here, on all of the fonts in the outline category, if we left click on this, we have the option to choose from default, which is just a satin stitch, to run, say, and hit apply, and we can see that it just does an outline run stitch. Or I'll put it in 3D so you can see that is stitches. That's not artwork. That's stitches. But it has these built in where if I change it, it actually changes it now to satin outlines. We can make it into an applique. We can make it the default stitch, which is a satin stitch with a run stitch going around it. So that's what it means for it to be an outline font. Now we are going to leave this on default here, which is the default is just a plain satin stitch letter. But what we need to do is we need to have a inflated outline that goes around our letters now. And the easiest way to create that is with this tool right up here. But if you look, it's grayed out. I've got my letters selected, and I go up to this tool, it's grayed out. I can't click on it. That's because the tool, the tool for creating outlines only works when what you're working with is artwork and not stitches. So there's a thing about the outline fonts that's different from all the other ones, and that's that you can convert them into artwork. Okay, so once something is artwork, then we have the ability to use some of the artwork generation tools on that. But what this is now is stitches, so we need to convert it. But we also still need to have the stitches, so we really need two instances of the word meadow here. We need this to say, we need this just two of these right on top of each other. And the easiest way to do that is to go up to your select tool here, select it with just a regular select tool, and then right click somewhere on it, choose copy, and then right click again and choose paste. So if we look in our sequence view now, we can see that there are two of these and that the second one is the one that is selected. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to take this one and we're going to right click somewhere on it again. This time, instead of copying or pasting, we're going to move down to where this says convert to artwork. This only shows up on the outline fonts. It does not show up on any of the other fonts. If it's not in this category, you can't do it this way. But anyway, we're going to left click on convert to artwork. Boom. And we can see that it has broken it out into individual, there's 6 individual shapes in here that have been created. But if we have all of them selected, which we do right now, when we create an outline, it'll create an outline that incorporates the entirety of the shape. So here's what we do. We can see that this tool is now lit up. It's not grayed out anymore. And if I click on it, it does stuff. This little menu comes up. So the default number of ripples is 5, and what that would do is it would create echoing outlines. That's not what we're looking for, although that is a neat technique we can use. We're going to set this to 1, which mine already is because I was doing this earlier. So we set the ripples to 1. The spacing, put at like 0.11 is fine. You know, if you're in inches. You could even do up to about 1/4 inch. The default here, which I think the default is 0.118, is perfectly acceptable though. So you can just leave that. You're going to leave this on cascade. If you do spiral, then it doesn't close the shape. And we want to have a closed shape. And we don't need to join the repeats because there is no repeats. There's only one. We're doing one ripple. And we do, however, want to put a check mark next to remove selection, because what that'll do is it'll get rid of these outline letters, which we don't need anymore. We only want the outline. Okay, and so once you have this, okay, so ripples 1, spacing 0.11 or 0.118. I mean, that's the default. It doesn't really matter if the 8 is there or not. And cascade and remove selection. Then just click OK. Boom. Okay, so now we've got our inflated artwork outline. And by inflated, what I mean is an inflated outline is an outline that gets its contours from the shape that it's based on. So this D, the distance from here to here is equal to the distance from here to here. All the way around, the outline is an equal distance from the actual letters. Okay, that's called an inflated outline. That's something that's very, very difficult to do by hand, but it's simple for a machine to do it. So, you know, the computer is able to just like that create an inflated outline. If we had to do it manually, it would not look this pretty. So, what do we do with this inflated outline now? Well, what we're going to do is we're going to turn this into a fill. And actually what we should have done was copied and pasted our first one, because we're going to have to change the order, because this needs to sew down first when we actually make the knockdown stitch. But that's fine, we can do that. So, but to turn this into the right kind of fill for a knockdown stitch is actually very similar to doing towel embossing. You may have watched one of my videos in the past about towel embossing, or Floriani actually just came out a couple days ago with their own version of the towel embossing video. And it's the same technique. What we're doing is knocking down the nap of the towel. Right? So to do that quickly and easily, we're going to use the Motif Fill button down here. We left click on that, boom, and we've got a nice fill that fills in, but it's not super, super dense. Actually, this is probably not even dense enough for our purposes. The default motif does actually work. I tested it earlier today, and I put the pattern size at 3 millimeters. So just set that to 3 and hit apply. Now, if you don't if you sew this out and you think that it's taken too long to sew this design out, you can choose a different one of these. But what you want is one that is kind of like X's. So like, see how this is like repeated X's. Another one that's pretty good is F061 down here. This one is pretty good. But any of them that kind of fill in the whole area with X's. This one here, F078, would be fine. But what you want is to have basically repeated little tiny X's that fill in an area. And essentially now what we need to do is move it so that the text sews out second, and we need these to be different colors. So say we're sewing these out on like a lavender towel, we would want our knockdown stitch to be the same color as our towel, and then the letters are whatever color we want our letters to be. So the whole idea of the knockdown stitch is that it will blend in with the thing that you're embroidering it on. So if you're embroidering on, you know, like a stuffed animal and it's got beige fur, you're going to want to use beige thread so that it blends in with the material. And another tip is don't use embroidery thread when you're embroidering out your knockdown stitch, because it's shiny and reflective. The whole point of embroidery thread is to be looked at and for it to reflect the light. And that's going to take away from your overall design, because it's going to attract attention to the knockdown stitch instead of attracting attention to the letters. So I would use a regular sewing thread, you know, something that's a dull matte finish. Don't use embroidery thread because it really doesn't look as good. So basically from there we've got our inflated, we've got our knockdown stitch. This is it. This is all it takes to do it. It's very, very easy. So I am pleased with that. Yeah, that's how you make a knockdown stitch. So what else could we do with this technique here? Well, if we wanted to do a towel embossing design, an interesting way to do it would probably be with an inflated outline. Instead of using a shape like a rectangle or a circle or whatever, a heart, whatever you got, you could use this inflated outline as part of a towel embossing design. So if you do that, a towel embossing design doesn't actually have any letters that are the built-in letters, that are the stitched letters. A towel embossing design just lets the nap of the towel come up through holes in the stitching and create a design using the negative space. So what does that mean? Now let me explain. If you don't know what towel embossing is, what it is it's you embroider it onto something with a nap like a towel, and there's going to be holes in the fill that looks just like that knockdown stitch, and it allows the nap of the towel to come up through the holes, and it creates a really, really interesting looking design. So the way that you would approach doing that, you could either use the a design like this that has the outlines built into it, or you can actually use the TrueType fonts that are built into your computer. So if you go on a website like dafont.com and download some interesting fonts, you can use any of those fonts that are available on the internet to do this technique. So if I go over here and I use, instead of the standard text tool, I use the TTF. Now TTF stands for TrueType font. If we import TTF artwork, we click on this, we get a little menu here. I'm going to again type in Meadow. I'm going to do it all caps this time. And then I'm going to select my font by clicking here on select. Now this set of fonts that I'm looking at, these don't have anything to do with Floriani at all. These are the fonts that are built into my computer. And again, like I said, you can get new ones. I have a good video explaining how to get your own fonts. If you go in my channel and do a search for dafont.com or do a search for fonts or something like that, you'll come across that video where I go and explain how to do that. But I'm just going to use one of the fonts that's on my computer. I'm going to use Cooper. That is a font that everybody should have, and it works for this technique pretty well. So here we go. We've got the word Meadow. We're using Cooper as the font, and we click OK. Okay, so here we go. There's my letters, and what these are is they're just artwork. Okay, these are not stitches at all. Now, I could make them stitches if I click one of my stitch buttons down here, but that's not what we're doing here. We are going to turn these into an embossed towel design. And so what we're going to do is we're going to right click them and oh, I'm sorry. We don't need to right click them. What we need to do is we need to click on our create outlines tool. And if you don't see this, then probably you may have clicked when I told you to right click and deselected your letters. So you want to make sure you reselect these letters. Click and drag a box around them. Click on them over in the sequence view, something like that. And then you're going to click up here on create outlines. Now, this time we need to remove the check mark from remove selection because we still want these letters to be there this time, right? We don't want the letters to disappear. We want them to stay. So we're going to click on that. And now here we might want to increase the space away from there a little bit. Let's just see what it looks like. So the default settings, back to here, we have this set on 1 ripple and the spacing on the default setting, cascade, no remove selection. Hit OK. Let's see what it looks like. Okay, so yeah, actually, you know what? This might work. I don't know. It depends on how big. Actually, yeah, no, this will be fine. So let's say we want to have this as big as we can possibly do it. We want to have it in the, say we have a Destiny or a Dream Machine, and we want to use the big hoop from a Destiny or Dream Machine to do this technique. We're going to go over here to the select hoop icon here. It doesn't matter what the actual size ends up being. We just want it to be kind of as big as we can possibly make it. We're going to go and choose the hoop that we want as the 240 by 360. That's the big hoop for a Destiny or Dream Machine. We want the hoop rotated by 90 because our design is longer than it is tall. So we're going to rotate the hoop and say OK. Cool. Now we can see our design. We'll select the whole thing so that make sure that everything is selected, and we'll move it down to a corner and grab one of these little sizing buttons here, these little black buttons. We'll drag this out so that it's nice and big. There we go. So this is going to fit. This is going to be, what's the size here? Oh, it's not telling me because because up here at the top it tells you what size something is, but only when it stitches. So if we want to see the size of this object, look down here in the corner. We've got selection size. This is going to be 13.5 inches wide, so that's pretty darn big. Anyway, once we've got our inflated outline, we've got it sized right. All we have to do is right-click with both of the with everything selected, choose Combine, and then make our Motif Fill. Okay, all the same settings apply. I would set the pattern size here to 3. Hit Apply. And there is going to be our embossed towel. So if you've never seen an embossed towel, what it's going to look like is the nap of the towel will just come up unimpeded through these holes, and this is going to hold the nap down. You sew it out with the same color thread as the towel, and I think that this gives a more interesting look than the traditional way of doing it, which is just have a rectangle or a square around your towel embossing. Now you see these jumps in here. Those you can ignore those. Those aren't going to sew out. Those are just an artifact of the way that the software generates the motif fill around the holes. They're not going to sew out. They're not going to be a problem. So just ignore them. Anyway, so that's there's a couple of cool techniques for you. Making a knockdown stitch and kind of using the same technique to do a more interesting version of the towel embossing technique. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I had fun making it. I'll see you next time. I'll try to make more videos. I know I haven't been making very many recently, but I'm pretty busy. So anyway, I'll see you next time. Thanks for watching.